Hi, it's Makaela here. Thanks for listening to my podcast. What you're about to listen to is an old episode of my podcast, The Midlife Awakening, which has now been replaced with the Deliberately Transformed Woman podcast. You'll still find some golden takeaways in these old episodes, but if you're the type of person who wants to discover and let go of the things that are holding you back in life by busting through fear and procrastination, overcoming imposter syndrome, and stepping into a life that is fulfilling, courageous, and intentional, then my new podcast episodes, starting from episode 21, are the ones you're looking for. You're listening to episode 4 of the Midlife Awakening podcast with Makaela Moore. Welcome to the Midlife Awakening podcast. I'm Makaela Moore, your host and certified transformation coach. I'm a 40-something woman who nerds out on brain science and believes every woman should be financially independent. This podcast is for women navigating their midlife who want to learn the secrets to unlocking their brain and freeing themselves from everything that holds them back so they can create lasting change in their lives, because everything is possible. Join me each week for conversations about the midlife and tips and tricks to hack your subconscious brain so you can deliberately transform your life and ultimately create your own financial security. First time here? Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Enjoy! Welcome to episode 4. I hope you're all having an amazing week. It is school holidays here in Queensland, and if you follow my Insta stories, you'll see that ours has got off to a flying start with my 7-year-old daughter Sydney, who she's one of those girls who's half tomboy, half princess. She decided that climbing up on top of one of our big water tanks, and these tanks are huge because being on acreage, we've got to be self-sufficient for water, and they've got to be like 9 or 10 foot tall. Anyway, she climbed up on the ladder of one of these tanks and jumped off the top down onto the ground and is now hobbling around on crutches with a badly sprained ankle. She had one of her friends over for the day, so I suspect she was showing off. And her friend is actually the daughter of some of our very dear friends. And when I heard what had happened, I think I was more grateful that her friend hadn't jumped than I was concerned that Sydney had. Can you imagine returning someone else's child who you are supposed to be looking after for the day and saying, "Oh, oops, by the way, we broke your child"? Yeah, me either. Now, funnily enough, my episode this week was going to be about dreaming big. So what a more fitting story to start this week's episode with than a story of a 7-year-old dreaming big and possibly trying to fly. As kids, we're so creative. We're dreamers. We don't yet have a limiting set of beliefs cemented into our brains. We have minimal fears until we're told that we should be fearful of something. When we're kids, we honestly believe that anything is possible for us in life because we just don't yet have all the doubts and societal norms and expectations ingrained into us yet. And at that age, our brains are also very good at interpreting things incorrectly. That's why so many kids say they want to be astronauts or doctors, vets, pilots, firefighters, elite athletes, or even the Prime Minister. All the jobs that most adults don't consider going into because they're hard, they're tough, they're a lot of work, they're dangerous, out of our league, or in the case of an astronaut, just out of this world. As adults, we think we have a more realistic expectation of ourselves, and we are told, either by ourselves or others, not to dream the silly pipe dreams. We are just normal, ordinary people, and those jobs are for exceptional people. Not people like me, because I'm not something enough. I talked last week about the common belief that a lot of people have about not being good enough. Not daring to dream big is just another example of thinking we're not enough. So we don't follow the dream of the big, amazing, audacious career, and we settle for a regular old job like most other people around us. And this doesn't have to be for jobs either. This could be about reaching an elite level of sport, or following your passion of acting or singing, or of conquering Mount Everest. But more often than not, we are not happy with the thing that we do settle for, because it's not our true passion. It's not what does or would light us up. But just because we gave up on our seemingly silly childhood dreams long ago doesn't mean we can't have them now or that we can't have new big dreams now. It all comes down to mindset and getting clear on exactly what you want, why you want it, what would happen if you got it, what would happen if you didn't get it, and finding out what is stopping you from achieving that now. With the exception of very few things in life, there is nothing we cannot do. Chances are, if someone else somewhere in the world has done what you're thinking of, then you can too. So I did say with some exceptions. Obviously, if you're a 5 foot nothing, then there's a pretty good chance you won't be playing in the NBA. Clearly, there are some physical limitations to some things, but in most cases, you can do the thing. You just may need to reprogram your subconscious brain first. I can remember a time in my 20s when the thought of actually owning a brand new car was something that was way out of my league. I would never be able to buy a brand new car. It was just such a big deal at the time. And yet I look back now, many years later, and I have only bought brand new cars for about the last 10 years. And I don't even think about it now. We just do it. I also remember many years ago thinking that I would never be in a position to buy a house, let alone a house that cost above the average. But I am, and I have bought several houses over the years now. I remember the thought of going to university seemed so far out of reach. I mean, my tertiary entrance score at the end of high school was the lowest possible score, so there was no way I could go to uni. But 10 years later, I resat that tertiary entrance exam, got an awesome score, and went to uni and completed a degree. And running a business. This was one of the scariest things ever. Not something that younger me ever thought would be an actual reality. A pipe dream maybe, but to do it for real? Nah. And yet, here I am running 2 businesses now. These things all at one point seemed like big, huge, insurmountable things that little old me could never do, until I up-leveled my thinking and did them, and then they weren't so big anymore. It was like, yep, done it once, I can do it again. These are all things that millions of people have done before me, and yet I didn't think I could do them. But why? Why did younger me think I couldn't do these things? Well, it was all my subconscious programming. It was a combination of a few things, actually. Firstly, I came from a family where no one at all in the history of our family has been to university. So the belief that was probably created when I was younger was if no one else in my family had done it, then I couldn't either. As kids, we model our parents or those close to us, and we see what's possible for our lives from what they do and how they live their lives. As I was growing up, we always lived in rented houses and drove secondhand cars, so I wasn't learning that anything more than that was possible for me. So we grow up with all these limiting beliefs about what is or is not possible for ourselves based on our childhood experiences. Which is why I'm trying to teach my own daughter that she can do anything she wants, except maybe jumping off 10-foot high water tanks and fly, because I don't want her growing up with limitations on her possibilities. Another thing that holds us back from dreaming big is fear. These could be fears that you are openly aware of, like you had a dream to be a pilot, but you have a fear of heights. Or these could be fears where they are so ingrained into your subconscious brain that you don't even realize they are there. And if you do, you don't see them as fears. You may simply see them as beliefs or things that are simply part of your life. Remember, our subconscious brains have one job, and that is to protect us from everything. So if we perceive that something is going to be hard, in most cases, our first instinct is to not do it, or to take shortcuts, or to try doing it differently, because our subconscious brain is trying to protect us from the hard thing. Fear is there to protect us no matter what. In some cases, rightly so, but in others, the fear is completely unwarranted. Change is one of those hard things that our brains try to protect us from, and the main reason for that is that our subconscious brain likes to be efficient, which is a nice way of saying it's lazy. It likes repetition and doesn't really want to do all the work of creating new brain pathways when you're learning or doing the new or hard thing. It just wants to keep doing what it's used to, the thing that it doesn't have to protect you from, the thing that it doesn't have to work for. Whereas this new thing comes with a whole raft of issues for our subconscious brain. It does not yet know if this new thing is safe and what it needs to protect you from. So it'll protect you from all of it by instilling fear into you. It doesn't like the exertion of forming those new neural pathways, so instead it tries to put you off with fear. And basically, the brain doesn't enjoy any of this, and our brain is a pleasure-seeking missile. So if it ain't pleasant, it does not want to know about it. This is one of the big reasons why we self-sabotage and procrastinate. It's our brain's way of saying, wait on, let's just look at this bright, shiny, pretty light over here and deflect from what's really going on because I can't be bothered with the change and the hard work and the displeasure of this new thing. But if we thought like that about every single thing in our lives, then we would still be crawling because we wouldn't have learnt to walk, which is one of the hardest things that we have to do as infants. You think about how easy it is for you to drive your car or ride your bike. When you first got behind that wheel, you had no idea what you were doing. You were scared, but you persevered because you really wanted to drive that car or ride that bike. You wanted to learn how to do it, and even when it was painful and even after you may have given up for a while, you eventually became proficient at driving that car or riding that bike. I distinctly remember as a youngster watching my parents change up and down through the gears of the manual car, thinking to myself that I'd never be able to learn how to do that. But I did, and it became second nature for me to drive a manual car. Now think about today. When you got in the car this morning to take the kids to school or drive yourself to work, did you even think about how to put the car in gear, or how to reverse out of your garage, or how to turn a corner, stop at the lights, avoid the other cars, and generally drive safely? I'm guessing that most of you did all of that without a single thought about what you were doing. That is all thanks to your subconscious brain. Because you've driven your car possibly thousands of times, the neural pathway that you created when you first started learning how to drive has now been myelinated, which means that every single time you do a new thing, there's a special thing in our brain called myelin, which is a fat that wraps itself around our neural pathways, effectively insulating that pathway, which is how things become ingrained for us. The more we do something, the better we get at it, and that is thanks to myelination, the process of the myelin insulating the thoughts, the actions, the habits, etc. So when you learnt to drive, you created this new pathway, and the more you drove, the more the pathway was insulated with myelin, which means now, barring a brain injury, you can never forget how to drive that car. The old saying of, it's like riding a bike, you never forget how, well, it wasn't created in jest. It was exactly this. But back to dreaming big. Before learning how to drive that car, you had fear for all sorts of reasons. But once you mastered it, there was no fear anymore. Now, I know there are a lot of people who've been driving for years and are fearful because of previous accidents, etc. But I'm just talking generally for this example. Once you mastered that new knowledge and that new skill, your brain locked it away through its process of myelination and didn't worry any further about that skill or knowledge because you were now confident and competent, which is the same for anything in our lives that we think we just can't do. As I said earlier, if someone else out there has done it, then there's no real reason why you can't too. The only thing stopping you is your stories. All the stories and excuses that instantly pop into your head as to why you can't do the thing that you're thinking of right now. Many people dream of writing a book, but they don't. And often the reason is because they can't. Well, why can't they? Is it because they can't read or write? Well, there'd be ways around that with scribes, etc. Is it because they don't have a story to tell or don't know what to write? Many published authors sat in their computers with blank screenitis, not sure what to write about, but they just started writing. Is it just because you know you could write a book, but you're afraid it's going to be shit, and therefore you don't bother? This is common too, and it comes back to what I've spoken about previously of caring too much about what others think and perfectionism. So what if you publish it and it's not a New York Times bestseller? At least you've done it, and you can do it better next time. So many of the really super successful entrepreneurs of our time had multiple failures before they succeeded. We can all do something, it's just that some people can do it way better than others. The point is, you can dream big and you can do big things, huge things even. I was doing some homework over the weekend for a program that I'm taking, and one of the questions was to write out my big vision for my life, with nothing left out. No holds barred, all in, balls to the wall, big, massive dream vision. That was definitely an interesting experience, but after going through that exercise, I find myself aiming so much higher than before. One part of my vision was this, and I'll sort of just read a little bit to you. To be a highly successful coach, impacting thousands of women worldwide and making a difference. To help women everywhere to get unstuck, let go of fear and societal expectations and pressures, and to create new pathways for their dream life and ultimately achieve the financial security that every woman deserves. In my vision, my podcast is a top-rating show. I am in demand for public speaking engagements at women's conferences. I am creating a program to help homeless women in Australia. We as a family are sponsoring more third world families and helping to educate the women and children to know that they're made for more than they've previously known. Right now, my family actually already sponsor 2 families in Thailand, so to be able to help more families would be amazing. There was a lot more to my vision, including things around family life, health, our bucket list, finances, parenting, relationships, looking after our aging parents, philanthropy, etc. When I started my journey of personal development, I never, ever considered having such a big impact in the world. I never thought about changing people's lives. But here I am already doing that in my own small way with this podcast, and yet the idea of having an impact on women on the other side of the world and of creating programs to help homeless women and doing all these big, massive, scary things is looking more and more like a reality to me, because I am daring to dream big, and because I'm passionate, and because I've found my life's purpose, and because I'm doing all this work on reprogramming my brain. While I'm not there yet, and lots of it is still scary to me, it is not as scary as it would have been even just a few months ago. The vision is starting to sit better in my subconscious, which is the first step to making it a reality. We all have choices in life. We can choose our thoughts and we can choose how we respond to situations. By raising our level of consciousness and taking a bird's eye view of our life from above, rather than being stuck down in the muck, we can step into our higher selves and create new realities. Doing the big things in life requires a change of mindset. You've created stories based on your past and you are attached to those stories. But are our stories even relevant anymore? Do we still want the things that we once told ourselves that we wanted? Did we really want it to start with, or did we say we wanted it because of what we thought it would do for us, or how it would make us appear to others, or did we think it was just expected of us? Whatever the story is, it doesn't have to stay the same. You have a choice, and you can change your stories. If dreaming big doesn't sit well with you, sit with that feeling and question it. Ask yourself what you're feeling and why. Ask yourself what's the worst thing that could happen if you did achieve the thing that you're dreaming of. And don't forget, this is all like peeling back onion layers. So changing your stories won't happen overnight. Changing the way you feel about the big scary things won't change overnight either. But the more we tell ourselves our new story, the more it will myelinate in our brains, and the sooner something that once seemed too big and unattainable will feel normal, and then eventually it might even feel like no big deal. So dreaming big doesn't have to be as scary as it feels. One of my coaches, Brooke Castillo, talks about feelings just being vibrations in our bodies. She says that we need the balance of positive and negative emotions, and that if we can practice feeling into those negative emotions when they arise, then they won't have so much power over us in the future. Because if we can call them out for just being a vibration in our body that is not actually going to harm us, and we just let it be without fighting it, then it will no longer have any power over us. She also has what she calls her model, in that our thoughts create our feelings, which in turn drive our actions and create our results. I'll go into this one much deeper in another episode, but if we can choose our thoughts and choose and change our stories, then we can effectively choose how we are going to feel about situations and circumstances. But if we let those ingrained stories take control, then we leave ourselves with no choice, and the negative emotions like fear will drive us. When I first started my life coaching journey, I had no idea where it would take me. I just assumed that I'd coach a few people one-on-one and make a small difference to a few people. I didn't know that I had a sacred duty to do something amazing in this world, to change lives, to make an impact on the world by helping women peel back their layers, to discover their true potential, to reveal their individual magnificence and create their best possible life. I didn't know any of that when I started. I did not know that this was in fact my life's purpose next to creating my family. If someone had told me even just 5 or 10 years ago that I would be aiming to make a big splash in the world, to impact the lives of thousands of women through my work, I would have run a mile, because even until recently, that just seemed way too big for little old me. But as my brain has evolved, so too have my beliefs and my perspective of what is possible for me. Just like driving that car, what once seemed impossible is now just an everyday habit. The evolution of my brain is, and always will be, a work in progress. I love learning and self-development and creating new possibilities for my life. I am so excited and scared for the vision that I have created for my future. It is big, it is hairy, it is audacious, it is out there. But had I not done all this work on myself over the last couple of years, this vision would not seem at all realistic. It would just be the words on a page, but it's not. Because alongside the fear, I am feeling the excitement, and I'm just letting them coexist for the moment, allowing my brain the time it needs to assimilate this big new vision, so that in time it'll just be a walk in the park or a drive in the car. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, dream big, beautiful. And that, my beautiful friends, is another episode of the Midlife Awakening. If you'd like more inspiration or to connect with other midlifers, head on over to my Facebook group, Deliberately Transformed. You'll find the link in the show notes. Until next time, cheers.